Hello everyone. Welcome to Breaking the Stigma. My name is Successful. I am the founder and CEO of the Minority Psychology Network. We have a special episode for you guys today. But before we get into that, I am going to introduce my co-host, Ari. I'm so excited to have him co-hosting alongside with me today, especially being that we are discussing a topic that's very, very, very serious around this time. So I'm going to let Ari talk a little bit about himself and what he does and why he's so, interested in the mental health field. So go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. First of all, this is actually a true honor. And my name is Ari. I'm the founder of Wolf Intelligence, which our goal is making it fun to learn about mental health, emotional intelligence, and self-love. A bunch of things that you probably didn't learn about in school, but here at Wolf Intelligence and the Minority Psychology Network, we're very just, what's the term, fascinated about getting these topics taught in school as early as elementary school, middle school, and high school. And that's my goal. And that's why I think we're going to be a good team working together. And again, thank you for having me on.
Yes, I mean, you're right. Like there's a lot of things that we didn't, learn in school about mental health. I didn't start learning about it until college. So so thank you so much for joining me today and I look forward to working together. All right. So now we're going to introduce our guest for today. She is an NPN member, but she does a lot of great things in the mental health field. Go ahead, Lay. Let's hear about you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here, Successful. I'm very excited to do this. I am a third-year doctoral student in a clinical forensic psychology program. I'm also working towards my licensure as a professional clinical counselor. And like you, I didn't really know about mental health until I was in college. And also with my own personal experiences, that's what really pushed me to work in the field because I don't want any other person to feel how I felt back then, where I was alone. I didn't know the resources available to me. I didn't have a good support system. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really a lot of the issue, the resources too. So we're definitely going to delve into that. So today we are discussing seasonal depression. This is a very serious topic. A lot of people don't even know that they experience it. So we're just going to jump right into it. So, Lay, what is seasonal depression?
So, seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that is related to the changes in seasons. There are two types, and the most common one is fall, winter, and the other one is spring, summer. So, this just basically indicates whether the individual would experience depressive symptoms during fall, winter season, or if it's more likely to occur during spring, summer.
So what are specifically the symptoms of this? And are there different symptoms depending on whether it's fall, winter, or spring, summer?
So there's not really much of a difference. So as I said earlier, it is a type of depression. So the symptoms that would occur in seasonal affective disorder would be similar to what you would typically see with someone who is suffering from major depression. So some of those, the most common symptoms would be feeling depressed most of the day or almost every day, losing interest or pleasure in those activities that you used to enjoy, having low energy, having problems with sleeping, seeing changes in your appetite, feeling sluggish or agitated, having difficulty concentrating, um, sometimes feeling hopeless, worthless, or helpless. And in severe cases, having those thoughts of death or suicide. But in terms of like what you said, if there's some differences between the seasonal types for winter, for fall, winter, the pattern is usually like oversleeping or overeating and sometimes social withdrawal, or they call it like hibernating, just because in the fall, winter, especially in the US, like the sun sets earlier. So the amount of daylight available is not really long enough. So that might prevent some individuals to go outside or feel like they're less motivated, less energy. And then in terms of spring, summer, most of the common symptoms around that type of seasonal affective um, pattern would be trouble sleeping, poor appetite, restlessness, anxiety, and in rare cases, episodes of violent behavior.
It's so interesting just listening to you like describe how it affects because of like the sun or, the weather and, temperature and things like that. It really makes you think like a lot of people will say like, oh, it's darker early, so I just want to stay in. But they never really like connected to and understand like it really does play a huge effect on your mental health. Like I didn't even think about that either. Like that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So like who's like at risk? Is there like certain people, like if you're already experiencing mental health issues, or can anybody be at risk for this?
So anybody can be at risk, but there are specific types of population or individuals who can be more vulnerable or predisposed to experiencing seasonal affective disorder. So it's more often seen among women than men, which is pretty interesting. And it's frequently seen in younger adults than in older adults. And like I said earlier, like in the US, because we have daylight savings time, seasonal affective disorder, especially the fall winter type, can be more common in those who live up north. So like people in Alaska, they're more likely to develop seasonal affective disorder compared to people who live in Florida. And like you said, people with mental health issues are more likely to be at risk in developing seasonal affective disorder. So SAD is more common in people with major depressive disorder or a history of major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder, specifically bipolar 2, which is the one associated with recurrent episodes of hypomanic episodes. And for me specifically, like I said earlier before we started, I do have seasonal affective disorder. And doing the research about this, I was surprised, or I guess like I was surprised, and at the same time, like I wasn't, because when I was a teenager, I did suffer from major depression. So to me, it kind of made sense. But I was also surprised because like I didn't think I'd be having seasonal depression. I just thought like when I didn't have those severe symptoms of like thoughts of suicide or self-harm, I thought that I was like, oh, I'm out of the woods. Like I'm never coming back to that. But then, realizing just this year actually that, oh, I have seasonal depression. That was like, oh, I guess like I'm never getting out of it. So it was kind of discouraging, but at the same time, it's like, it happens.
So is this something like that's an interesting point. So is it something that you deal with every single year with the same intensity, or is it some years it's a little more intense than others?
So that's an interesting question. I wasn't really diagnosed until this year. I've been thinking about it because since college, when I thought like, oh, I don't have any major depression, I still get those I still experience those symptoms, but not as severe as when I had major depression. And then when I went through an intake and they started asking me questions, well, when do you usually feel those symptoms? That's when I was like, oh, back in college, I already had these symptoms, and it's specifically like fall to winter. And usually, like even with my behavior, I'm more energetic during the summer, but when it comes to fall to winter, I just lose like motivation, my energy. I stay more inside. I don't really like want to go outside, even if like it's to hang out with friends or see family. I just want to be in like my cocoon.
Wow, that's really interesting that you actually took the time to see like, okay, what is actually happening with me? A lot of us try to like deflect or, put it on other things like, life issues like working or, all of your responsibilities and things like that. So that's really commendable that you took the time to really understand so that way you can work through that with yourself, which is super important. So that kind of brings me to the next question, like what are like the triggers to even recognize it?
So some of the triggers, the main one would be the changes in the season, especially with fall to winter. As soon as you start noticing that the sun sets a little bit earlier, there's usually you'll notice that you feel less energetic or less motivated, or you just see a shift in your behavior and your thinking and how you're feeling. At least for me, that's how I immediately noticed it. Also, some of the triggers are sometimes chemicals in your brain or chemicals in your body. So, for instance, serotonin, melatonin, and in some cases, vitamin deficiencies. So, vitamin D and vitamin B. So, usually with seasonal affective disorder, your triggers would be a huge or a shift in your circadian rhythm because, like I said earlier, daylight savings time kind of confuses your body. It's darker outside, but it's only 4 p.m. or it's only 5 p.m. And with this changes in like the seasons, it can affect your serotonin levels and your melatonin levels.
Mm, that's interesting. So do you think that family specifically plays a factor in the seasonal depression?
So, yes, in terms of if you have a family history of depression in or bipolar depression or bipolar 2, I mean, then yeah, it is a factor in developing seasonal affective disorder.
That's so interesting that you mentioned family, Ari, because we have like Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of that stuff coming up. And last year, because of COVID, a lot of families didn't get to really celebrate and come together. Do you think that COVID has played a role in seasonal depression for many people?
I think so, definitely. Especially with the anxiety with like going out and about and being with other people with COVID going on. It can definitely exacerbate or worsen seasonal affective disorder. Because if you're already, like for instance, if your seasonal depression is based on having vitamin deficiencies or if your melatonin levels are off, then if you're reducing even more your exposure to sunlight, then it can definitely worsen your symptoms.
Is there a specific just amount of time that you'd want to be out in the sun, or do you think that it kind of varies from person to person, that everybody has different needs?
I think it varies person to person, and it also depends on whether you're working with a professional or not. So for instance, like if you want to take that initiative to like, oh, I'm gonna be spending a certain amount outside just to get that sunlight, if you think that helps you, then definitely do it. But if you feel like that's not enough or there's really just no motivation for you to even go outside, then seeing a professional therapist or even a physician would be the best idea so that they can help you kind of figure out what options are there for you to um, still get those sunlight exposure, but also consider your other symptoms like low energy, low motivation.
It's so interesting. All three of us pretty much mentioned that we didn't learn about mental health until, college. And I'm just thinking about the youth that could be experiencing this and not really understanding it. And then their parents who may not understand mental health either don't really even know what their child may be, experiencing. So that's just a thought that came through my mind like, wow, there's a lot of people, even kids that are dealing with something like this, especially, this time of year when you're seeing like other kids get all these gifts and toys and clothes and shoes. And now they have social media, where you see all of that. So I'm pretty sure that plays like a huge factor. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think that's why we're also doing what we're doing is because for us, we experienced that we didn't really get exposed to mental health till later on. And I think it's very important for youth, especially parents or family members, to be aware because, like, the symptoms that I mentioned, you'd think that it might just be, normal or life issues when in fact there's something else going on and they might need help. And with youth now, with their quick access to technology, that can affect how like their social environment. Are they going out? Are they even having that like exposure to sunlight? Or even for college students, like some people are not really a morning person, so they would schedule their classes like towards the end of the day, which was what I did.
Mhm.
And even just a simple thing like that can lead to like severe vitamin D deficiencies, and you wouldn't even realize that because of that you're experiencing all these symptoms. You'd just think that, oh, because I'm a college student, I'm working, I'm overwhelmed, that's the reason. Yes, that can be the reason, but it can also be because physically there is like an imbalance in your vitamins or your neurotransmitters, and that's also contributing to the issue.
That's awesome. If you think that if you were to start talking about this stuff in school, seasonal depression, how would you kind of introduce it? Would you introduce it as like a holistic thing, or maybe just like one specific issue that's not related to anything else?
I think maybe starting it with like asking them if they feel like changes, at least noticeable changes for them, um, when seasons change, like if they feel more energetic during the summer, or if they feel like during the winter they feel like they're more withdrawn, or they feel like, oh, I don't really want to go out. Maybe that can be like a good starter about talking about seasonal affective disorder, and then bringing into how much sunlight do you get like in summer versus in winter or fall. What other activities like do you usually do like in summer, and then you see you don't do anymore during fall or winter, and then go from there.
I like that because it's like instead of just introducing them to certain language, you're basically making them introspect and becoming more aware. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great idea. It kind of brings me to Ari, how you do your videos, and if you want to talk a little bit about how you like show the videos on how different ways you can learn about mental health and things like that. Like,
Yeah, I was actually gonna I'm actually considering making an episode on seasonal depression because we're talking about it now, but my goal is to try to make these videos like under 5 minutes. So to explain a topic like very quickly, very succinctly, and then aim it towards middle school students who, when we
Mhm.
were all in middle school, we had very short attention spans and with the rise of TikTok and social media. So I think that these places, social media is a pretty much a breeding ground for negativity, and if we have more people like the Minority Psychology Network with your huge influence and network to have more people in the creator space spreading positivity and just educating people in kind of entertaining ways, I think that could go a long way to breaking the stigma around a lot of these mental health issues.
I definitely agree. Let's talk about like treatment. What are some like treatment goals or things for treatment?
For seasonal affective disorder. So as I mentioned earlier, with treatments regarding seasonal depression, it's best to do it with a professional, whether a mental health professional or a physician. With me, at least, what happened was I had to do certain tests physically first because they wanted to make sure that everything is good, like in terms of like my vitamins and all that, to see whether that was affecting my mood. So like I mentioned earlier, like vitamin D, vitamin B, and melatonin. If that still doesn't help, like if it alleviates just a little bit and still doesn't help, usually pairing it with therapy, some type of therapy, is recommended. So for instance, light therapy, it aims to expose people with SAD to a bright light every day to make up for that diminished natural sunshine, especially like in Alaska or other places that gets very dark for like a long time. And then chronotherapy is a type of technique that is used to kind of help nudge your circadian rhythm, given that changes in sleep patterns are linked to seasonal affective disorder. And what happens is pretty much you're actively trying to make a change in your sleeping habits to see if being out in the sun helps your mood change. And there has been a previous research on chronotherapy that showed depression levels decreased by 34%. And then there's also your psychotherapy, where you see a therapist just to kind of help you alleviate or reduce the intensity of the depressive symptoms you're experiencing. In some cases, if you're already in therapy and you're doing these light exposures and it's not helping, then sometimes it would be antidepressant medications would be prescribed to you. If not, if it's not that severe, then if you have a vitamin deficiency or some type of imbalance, then they would prescribe you to take either high levels of or high doses of vitamin D or vitamin B, or sometimes melatonin.
Wow. That's Do you think that there's a different sort of treatment, as you were saying, based on people in like Alaska, where in the winter they might not even see the sun for like a whole week, compared to like I live in New England, so the winters are kind of brutal here, but not to the point where like they are in Alaska.
Yeah, I think with those individuals who are like who don't really get that much sunlight, then the light therapy would be highly recommended, most likely, because how else can you manufacture natural sunlight if that's not really available for them?
Wow, that's really, really interesting. I always said I wanted to do like a vacation in Alaska, like right in the middle, like because I think it's like 6 months dark and 6 months light. So I wanted to see like for a week, how is it to be dark for a week and light for a week? Like, I just think that would be so crazy. Yeah. So what are some ways that people can learn about, seasonal depression?
So one of the few ways you can learn more about seasonal depression is, besides using Google, I would recommend the National Institute of Mental Health. They have a lot of resources on their information, especially not just for seasonal depression, but other types of mental illnesses as well. And they also have hotlines for their like what how can you reach out for support, and then also mental health first aid. Those two websites are very helpful in terms of providing education, providing resources, not only for individuals who may be experiencing or struggling with those mental illnesses, but also for parents, family members, teachers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also add download the MPN app. Go to your app store and type in MPN. And also, this podcast is going to be up there as well. So that way, if you missed anything, you can go back and get some resources from there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this was great. I feel like we got a lot of information out there, and thank you, Lei, for also sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of people can relate, especially being that we are at that time of year, and just looking for those triggers and different signs to let you know that maybe this is something that you're experiencing and how help is actually possible. Is there anything you would like to add, Ari?
I think that was mostly it. I wanted to ask one specific question, going back to you were talking about how seasonal depression was more diagnosed in women than men and younger people than adults. Do you think that part of the reason could be that like younger people are more likely to express their emotions and older people might be more willing to keep it in and kind of pretend like nothing's going on type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking that too. Just because like I know older generation is kind of just like get over it. Or it's like, life happens, suck it up. So I definitely think the differences in mindset now has influenced the statistics in terms of which populations are it's more prevalent and seen.
Yeah, because I see that also in the difference between women and men is that like when I was going through depression, I never told anybody for maybe like 6 months to a year because I was just taught that men aren't really supposed to have emotions, or when we do, we just keep it suppressed and we keep it in. So I think that could be another reason why these diagnoses are lower in men than women. So I just want to say, like, as the only guy on this, like, if somebody's going through it, understand that you can speak up and tell people, and like it's okay, you won't be judged. This is the whole point
Mhm.
of us doing this, to break the stigma and raise
Right.
awareness and share the information.
And you're also human, so
Mhm.
everyone experiences those things, those emotions.
Right. That is so true. Thank you for sharing that, Ari. That's definitely another topic that we have to delve into because that's a whole subject on its own. Seriously, it's something we should talk about more frequently, because men's mental health, it does trickle down to families, and and it's just a lot that goes into that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. This was Breaking the Stigma. Make sure that you check out more episodes coming soon. We definitely make sure once a month we have different topics surrounding mental health. And again, download the NPN app. Thank you again to our guest Lay and Ari. I look forward to hosting more podcasts with you. So everybody have a great day. And this is Breaking the Stigma.